Okay, we're going to do a little bit of section 1.3 that we did in the face-to-face class today. So this is going to be complex numbers. And I guess the date was 1/22. So we're gonna kind of pause here wherever we paused in class, and then after we get through it in the face-to-face class, we'll put a second part of the video up. So we're looking at the complex number system, which complex numbers all have the form a plus bi. In this form, I is the number that when you square it is -1. You could also say, due to this, we could also say I is equal to the square root of -1. So these are, so complex numbers, they all have the form a plus bi. And in this case, here's two different expressions that we can kind of use to identify what I is. Some vocabulary, a is called the real part. And the number that's paired with the I, in this case b, this is called the imaginary part. Okay, so we're going to kind of move along, and the first thing our book has us do, and this is the main focus of what we're going to be dealing with today, is going to be dealing with square roots of negative numbers. So the book says for an a value that is positive, meaning it's greater than 0, if you take the square root of negative a, that equals I times square root of positive a. So we're going to use this to simplify down some examples, and just go through the book. I think we went up to example 2 today, and had to pause there. So we'll go up to example 2, and then pause there in the lesson, and then whenever we cover the rest of it, we'll put the. I'll probably finish off the notes on Monday afternoon and post the rest of them there. So for this one here, we got. We want to simplify each of these down to the form a plus bi. We got square root of -16. Part B is square root of -70. And part C is square root of -48. We can't start simplifying these terms down until we get these as square roots of positive numbers. So on each of these, step 1 is to go through and use this rule up here. So square root of -16, we would say that's I times square root of positive 16. And now that we have this as square root of a positive number, we could say, oh, square root of 16, that's 4. And we could write our answer as I times 4, but that looks a little weird. So normally we're going to kind of switch around and say, let's put the number 4 first and I afterwards. So for part B, we got a square root of -70. So we'll say that's I times square root of positive 70. 70 is just 7 times 10. There's no real perfect squares in it, so that's kind of as simple as that gets. And then for part C, we could say that is I times square root of 48. Now that we have 48 as a positive number, we could say 48 is square root of 16 times square root of 3. Square root of 16 is 4, so we have I times 4 times square root of 3, which we could also write as 4 times I times square root of 3 if we wanted to write it that way as well. As long as you have a 4, an I, and a square root of 3 multiplied together, you would get this correct. So that is that was our first example. So today in class what we did is we finished up section 1.2, which we already have videos posted of. And then this is where we kind of stopped in class today, was example 2. We did parts, part A wants us to go through and take square root of -7 times square root of -7. Part B wants us to go through and find square root of -6 times square root of -10. Part C says, what about square root of -20? All that over square root of -2. And part D says square root of -48. All that over square root of 24. And so it wants us to go through and just simplify each one of these down. And then we'll kind of pause on this video here, and I'll post that up there, and then I'll record the second part of it probably Monday afternoon. So for these, you got two square roots and negatives. So before we can combine stuff up, we need to make these square root of positive values. And let me just kind of put little lines under the problem statement versus the work. So now that I pull I out on this one and an I out on that one, we get down to this statement. I times I is I squared. Square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is the square root of 7 squared. I squared is negative 1. And when you square a square root, that goes away. So we just get left with negative 7 in this case. For this one here, we get this is going to equal I times square root of 6. This will be I times square root of 10. I times I is I squared. Square root of 6 times square root of 10 is square root of 60. Now that this is a positive number, we can say that square root of 60 is square root of 4 times square root of 15. So I squared is negative. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 15 is square root of 15. It doesn't simplify nicer. So that is our answer to part B. For part C, again, step 1, pull i's out. So we get I square root of 20 over I square root of 2. I over I can cancel. Now that we got these as square roots of positives, we can view this as big square root of 20 divided by 2. And square root of 20 over divided by 2 is square root of 10. And that's as simple as that gets. So we're going to box that in and say that's good enough there. And finally for part D, we get I square root of 48 divided by square root of 24. These are both square roots of positive numbers, so we could say this is I times square root of 48 over 24. And 48 divided by 24 is 2. So we get I square root of 2 for that one, and we would say that is our answer there. And as far as the face-to-face class, this is as far as we got. So we're going to kind of pause here on notes. I'll post the rest of them later this weekend or Monday afternoon, and I think it'll be Tuesday that we'll get to them in the next face-to-face class. And we'll just kind of go from there. All right.